Hello and welcome to a very busy edition of your Newsmax Daily for Thursday, February 20th, 2025. 2/20/25 on your monitor or in your journal. Man, do I wish I kept a journal. Today is National Love Your Pet Day, and who doesn't love their pet? Especially Greta Van Susteren. Even people that have pet snakes love their pets, right? On the food calendar, today is National Cherry Pie Day and National Muffin Day. Any kind of a muffin. No specific flavor. If you're one of the millions of people, tens of millions of people stuck inside because of the snow or ice or dangerously low temperatures like 3/4 of the country, why not celebrate the day by baking some muffins or a cherry pie? If you have plans to travel today, flying specifically, well, driving is going to be very difficult in many places as well. But if you're flying, once again, cancellations and delays continuing throughout the country. And if you are flying, you don't want to hear this, but the FAA and the NTSB now investigating another deadly plane crash. It happened yesterday. 2 people killed in a mid-air collision between 2 small planes, a Cessna and a Lance Air, near Tucson at Marana Regional Airport, if you know where that is. President Trump, meanwhile, returned to the White House last night after several days in Florida. This is from on board Air Force One.
I mean, we hope everything's fine with Fort Knox, but we're going to go to Fort Knox, the fabled Fort Knox, to make sure the gold is there.
Where would the gold have gone?
If the gold isn't there, we're going to be very upset.
You can hear a reporter in the background say, "Where would the gold have gone?" Well, that would be the question, wouldn't it be, if the gold is not there? Yesterday, Trump became the first U.S. president to address the Future Investment Initiative Institute in Miami. I told you about it a little bit yesterday, and I told you there were demonstrations outside the event because it was held by Saudi Arabia.
Thank you very much. What a great group this is. You have to see outside. It's going wild outside with a lot of love for all of us, I guess.
Miami Mayor Francis Suarez, who you may recall was a Republican presidential nominee for literally a hot minute. The president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who lives in Miami, was there. People are criticizing that because the Saudis invested big in Jared's private equity firm. Elon Musk was there, and many business leaders from the Middle East as well.
I come today with a simple message for business leaders from all across the nation and all around the world. If you want to build the future, push boundaries, unleash breakthroughs, transform industries, and make a fortune, because you want to make a fortune. Most of you have already made a fortune. I don't want to say that. There's no better place on earth than the current and future United States of America under a certain president named Donald J. Trump. I think that you're going to do very well. They're saying that November 5th, Election Day, 2024 will go down as one of the most important days in the history of our country. They said in 129 years, the most consequential election. I don't know if they're right about that or not, but it sounds good. I wanted to see if I could get a couple of more years tacked on, but I figured the fight wasn't really worth it. 129 is a lot. And as of January 20th, 2025, the dark days of high taxes, crushing regulations, rampant inflation, flagrant corruption, government weaponization, oh, I know about weaponization, and total incompetence will be gone forever. They'll be gone forever. Because the United States is back and open for business, and the golden age of America has officially begun. You see it happening. Since my election, America's economic engines have come roaring back to life in just a very short period of time. Think of it, from November 5th, the progress that's been made has been amazing. The NASDAQ is up nearly 10% in just a few months, and that's a lot. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 2,200 points, and Bitcoin has set multiple all-time record highs because everyone knows that I'm committed to making America the crypto capital. We want to stay at the forefront of everything, and one of them is crypto, and Miami seems to be the center of the action, come to think of it, and maybe it'll stay there. Business optimism skyrocketed 42 points. Think of that in a single month, the most in history by far. That's the biggest increase in history by not even close. The ISM index of manufacturing activity surged into positive territory for the first time in many years. Amazing. And it was just announced, this is an interesting one, I didn't realize it was that bad for so long, but it was just announced by one of the nation's most historically accurate and respected pollsters, Rasmussen, that the number of Americans who believe our country is on the right track now exceeds those who think it's heading in the wrong direction for the first time in 20 years. Can you believe that? 20 years. And this is really a seismic 27-point swing from just before the election. Nobody's ever seen anything like that one yet, sir. I want to tell you, that's a big one. The best and most successful business leaders on earth are now racing to invest in the United States. Since November, DMAC has announced plans to invest $40 billion in the U.S., creating at least 10,000 jobs. SoftBank has announced investments of between $100 and $200 billion, creating at least 100,000 American jobs. Oracle and OpenAI and SoftBank are now collectively committing $500 billion to keep the United States on the cutting edge of artificial intelligence, and so many more. I mean, so many companies that want to come to the White House and have a little news conference all the time. I said, why don't you just announce it? But they want to come, and I'll do that. I don't mind doing that. I say anytime they want to go 10 billion or more, I'm there. 10 billion or more.
The president working hard to add Saudi Arabia to that list of countries that is investing big in the United States. Between giving speeches and flying around, he found time to sign an executive order that calls for cutting all taxpayer-funded benefits to illegal immigrants. Today, President Trump is hosting a reception in the East Room of the White House honoring Black History Month. Tonight, he will speak at the Republican Governors Association meeting, and I expect that sometime today, maybe even by the time you hear this, the president will be making comments about the devastating news out of the Middle East. Hamas returning the bodies of 4 dead hostages, including 2 children, a mother and 2 children, and an 83-year-old person whose wife had also been detained back on October 7th and was released in late October. Now the 83-year-old husband among the dead. This will be one of the top stories today. There's also a White House press briefing happening this afternoon. You can see it on Newsmax. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions around Israel and Hamas, Ukraine and Russia, Zelensky and Putin, as well as the battle brewing on Capitol Hill over the budget. Bianca De La Garza spoke about it with Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson.
Okay, so fill us in. We know President Trump has said it is this one big, beautiful bill he wanted to fund the government. Even this morning on Truth, saying that the House resolution implements my full American First agenda, everything, not just parts of it. We need both chambers to pass the House budget to kickstart the reconciliation process. But the vote for the House is next week, and there's a razor-thin majority, where meantime, the Senate, you guys are moving straight ahead. Obviously, John Thune and you guys have a plan and a vision. Is yours the better way to do it?
Well, we're certainly taking the path of trying to keep it simple. What the House is trying to do, and I applaud their efforts, is very complex, which means it's going to be very difficult to pass. What we're trying to do is prioritize things. President Trump ran one of his top priorities was secure the border. He's making great progress, but he needs the funding. And so we don't want to let this thing get bogged down, so we want to provide the funding for the border, funding to defend this nation. I've actually recommended a 3-step process. The next thing I would do is using current tax policy in our budget. I would just extend current tax policy to take a massive automatic tax increase off the table, which, by the way, the reason there's a massive automatic tax increase is the way we structured the Tax Cut and Jobs Act is it automatically expired. We shouldn't do that again. And that's one of the problems with what the House is working on right now is whatever tax policy we enact will automatically expire after 10 years, unless we can come up with the way more spending cuts, which I'd be supportive, but then what the House is contemplating. But let me just quickly lay out some numbers.
Right.
In 2019, we spent $4.4 trillion. This year, we'll spend about $7.3 trillion. That's a 61% increase, while our population has grown only 2.6%. There's no justification for that massive tax increase, for that spending increase. By the way, I don't think very few people, probably nobody that voted for Trump, expected him to continue spending at Biden's levels. So we have to focus on spending, spending, spending. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a horrible tax code. Love to simplify and rationalize that. But we have a spending problem. That's what we primarily need to prioritize and attack.
And DOGE is attacking it, and DOGE is trying to make some cuts. I mean, they say they're hoping for $1 trillion, but bit by bit, we see sort of this peel back the layers, Social Security. People, there's no way there's somebody who's 200 years old. And we see the cuts. And now there's this interesting proposal, Senator Johnson. Elon Musk is saying there might be a DOGE dividend, was a tax refund check funded with a portion of the savings. I mean, people would love that, anything that puts more money in our pockets. And to your point, the government will go bankrupt at the rate of this spending. So, I mean, if DOGE can cut things and also give a refund check, wow, is that actually possible?
Well, I'm happy to do that once we balance the budget. So, listen, I love what Elon Musk is doing. He's a genius. He's got really smart people looking at the data and exposing the waste, fraud, and abuse. But those savings ought to be put towards spending reduction so we can balance the budget, so we can start returning more money to the American taxpayer, because inflation is the silent tax. And massive deficit spending, that's what sparked 40-year high inflation. We don't want to spark another round of record high inflation. So first we have to balance the budget. That's got to be our focus. But I love what Elon's doing. He is highlighting the waste, fraud, and abuse. You know, people ought to be outraged by what he is discovering here. And we need to use his discoveries to actually use the budget process then to reduce spending. That's got to be our entire focus. We have to return to some reasonable pre-pandemic level of spending.
Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson, a member of the Senate Budget Committee on Newsmax with Bianca De La Garza, who mentioned the president wants one big, beautiful spending bill. That is a quote from the president. The Senate, as Johnson said, is pushing for a slimmed-down bill basically focused on the border and defense, and maybe two bills. Bianca also spoke about it with Florida Congressman Byron Donalds, a member of the House Oversight Committee.
All right, let's tackle this. So the president right there, pretty clear. One big, beautiful bill, get it done, all in one fell swoop. But the House is voting next week. Some are worried that there is some opposition. And the Senate's version, which is breaking it down into two, is getting a vote potentially this week as well. So what do you say to the folks in the Senate, John Thune, and even Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin just said he wants to make it simple, saying that might be problematic to put it all in one?
Well, look, this has been a concern on the Hill for a couple of months. Do you do one bill or two bill? For the most part, I've been agnostic. Recently, I've said, look, let's do two bills. But if the president wants to do one, let's just do the one and move on with it. I think the technical aspects of getting the president's agenda through is going to rest on mandatory spending cuts. There is a large appetite on Capitol Hill, members in the Senate and in the House who want to see mandatory spending be reduced through this process, and also bring in a lot of the DOGE reforms that Elon and President Trump are working on to find those wasteful parts of our government and get that stuff weeded out as soon as we can. You can do a good chunk of that in budget reconciliation. The work that the DOGE is uncovering, you can get that done through reconciliation. So, yeah, I understand the president's view of wanting to have one bill. And look, at this point, let's just get moving on the agenda and get it done. But a lot's going to be really determined over the next couple of weeks. But if it's one bill or two bill, I remain agnostic. It's about getting the agenda accomplished. That's what matters. And so we're just going to move forward.
All right, we're going to watch it move forward step by step. You talked about DOGE, and there was a win. Tanya Chukon declining to give this temporary restraining order so they can move forward. They can look at IRS, accessing some of this wasteful spending. And Elon Musk is even now saying, and he posted on X, he's going to see about possibly sending rebate checks for the Americans. That would be a great idea. Would you support that? And is it actually feasible with the type of spending that the government has right now?
Not really clear right now whether it's feasible or not. It is a great idea, but I think one of the things that's just as important is if you're going to take these savings to begin to pay down the national debt. We are about to refinance about a third of our national debt that's at higher interest rates. If there's anything we can do to take those funds that we find in savings in order to repay some of those treasury bonds, that will be very helpful because it would decrease the interest burden on the United States government, which is an interest burden on the American people. So whether it's rebate checks or it's paying down the debt, either way that works well. But the work that the DOGE is doing is critical to the fiscal health of this nation going forward. And Tanya Chukon, who, by the way, is the same federal judge who was allowing the lawfare to go against Donald Trump, for her to stand in the way of us actually cleaning up Washington once and for all is one of the reasons why there's so many people in our country who do not trust the justice system as it exists right now. And it's also why Donald Trump is doing the heavy lifting that needed to be done for a long time of cleaning out Main Justice and cleaning out a bunch of these U.S. attorneys who have been impediments to the rule of law, impediments to our U.S. Constitution.
Florida Representative Byron Donalds, who spent about 20 years working in the banking industry before getting into politics, so I trust he knows what he's talking about when it comes to some finance. On a side note, Donalds is also an early frontrunner in the upcoming Florida gubernatorial race to succeed Governor Ron DeSantis. The other big story, of course, is Ukraine, more specifically, the Ukrainian president. President Trump ruffling feathers here at home and around the world by accusing Ukrainian President Zelensky of being a dictator because they haven't held elections in Ukraine and he wasn't voted in by the people. Ruffling feathers, being a disruptor, that's basically what Donald Trump does, right? And he's good at it. President Zelensky says the Ukraine, under martial law, because of the war, is why he was unable to hold elections. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley and other Republicans saying the president's comments are simply aimed at ending the war. This is Trump's style. This is how he works. This is where the disrupting comes in. Most people know that by now.
My guess is he's expressing some frustration with Zelensky, but this has been very tough on Russia getting them to the negotiating table. That's good.
And more on this from Rob Finnerty.
Lincoln ended the Civil War. Eisenhower ended the Korean War. Nixon ended the Vietnam War. And it looks like Donald Trump is about to end the war in Ukraine. And the media seem absolutely stunned by that development, shocked that someone campaigned on doing something and is now trying to actually achieve that.
But we're stuck in that war unless I'm president. I'll get it done. I'll get it negotiated. I'll get out. We got to get out. If I'm president, I will have that war settled in one day, 24 hours. As president-elect, if I win this election, the first thing I'm going to do is call up Zelensky and call up President Putin, and I'm going to say, you got to make a deal. This is crazy.
So after 3 years of Ukrainian flags in people's yards and Republicans and Democrats in Congress wearing Ukrainian lapel pins, after 3 years of raising the president of Ukraine to almost mythical status, how dare evil Donald Trump try to end the war in Ukraine? President Zelensky is a saint, according to the media, for the last 3 years.
This relationship has not been good from the very beginning when Zelensky refused to play ball on the Biden investigation. And so, Donald Trump is somewhat on a revenge tour. Let's just all admit that.
And yet you have the president repeating talking points that, really the Kremlin could have drafted. Calling for an election right now in Ukraine as Russia occupies nearly 20% of Ukrainian territory.
We have Vladimir Putin and Sergei Lavrov agreeing with Donald Trump or saying that, he understands them. There's a couple of things going on there. So if Donald Trump thinks that he can placate them, that he can try to make some deal that it actually isn't backed by security guarantees and power, he is lying to himself.
What most Americans don't know is that 1 million people are either dead, injured, or missing in Ukraine. 1 million people in our own media doesn't like that Donald Trump is trying to bring an end to that killing because President Zelensky is fighting for democracy. How many times have we heard that? He's fighting for democracy. What does that even mean? I remember the narrative around Ukraine being that it was one of the most corrupt countries in Europe before the war started. So corrupt, they put Hunter Biden on the board of one of their biggest energy companies. But do actual real democracies just cancel presidential elections? Most people here probably don't realize this happened because our media is dishonest, but President Zelensky canceled the Ukrainian presidential election last spring, citing the war as his reason. According to Zelensky, the time just wasn't right for an election because of the war, and just like that, the presidential elections were canceled in a supposed democracy. I'm sorry, but that's not something that happens in a real democracy. You don't cancel elections, and guess what? That has never happened in America once. The White House was literally burned to the ground during the War of 1812 by the British. Washington was occupied by the British. And 3 months later, while it was still occupied by British redcoats, James Madison won the 1812 presidential election.
Rob Finnerty is the host of Finnerty, 8 p.m. Eastern on Newsmax. President Trump also has the media in a frenzy after posting a picture of himself with a crown and calling himself a king. This after revoking federal approval for congestion pricing driving in New York City, the first step towards fulfilling another campaign promise to kill the $9 daytime fee to drive in Manhattan south of 60th Street. The Midtown Tunnel from Long Island to Queens into Manhattan and the Lincoln Midtown Tunnel from New Jersey both come into Manhattan south of 60th Street. And it cost $11 or $12 to go through the tunnel. A little less probably if you have the Easy Pass. And then $9 when your vehicle hits the street in Manhattan. $20 just to get into the city. Or $20, maybe even more now, I'm not sure, to drive over some of the bridges, which also put you into Manhattan south of 60th Street. Well, some of the bridges. And you wonder why so many people are leaving. Trump posted on Truth Social, congestion pricing is dead. Manhattan and all of New York is saved. Long live the king. And today, the media, who bites on every carrot that Trump dangles, is going berserk. Governor Kathy Hochul vows to keep the congestion pricing in place. In downtown Manhattan on Wall Street, stocks opened in the red this morning after some concerning news in Walmart's earnings release. And Bloomberg News says retailer Forever 21 may be headed for a second bankruptcy. The fashion store plans on closing up to 200 stores as a part of the bankruptcy. And in sports, you likely don't want to miss this hockey game tonight, whether you're a hockey fan or not. Team USA is playing Canada again tonight in the four-nation championship game after eliminating Sweden and Norway. You remember when they played last week, Canadians booed the national anthem, and then there were three vicious fights in the first 9 seconds of the game. Two of them from the Tkachuk brothers, who are becoming American heroes. Again, Matthew Tkachuk from the Florida Panthers is the one that spoke at the White House when the Stanley Cup champion Panthers visited the White House a couple of weeks ago. Tonight's game is at the TD Garden in Boston, where there's vicious fights at every game. President Trump was actually invited to attend the game by the manager of Team USA, saying the players would love to have him there. No word from the White House yet if the president is planning on attending the game. Be sure to keep up with all of the news and breaking developments. Once again, there will be plenty of them throughout the day on Newsmax N2 and at Newsmax.com. It all begins each and every morning with Wake Up America, National Report, Bianca De La Garza, Carl Higbee on Frontline, Rob Schmidt, Finnerty, Greg Kelly Reports, Chris Plant and the Right Squad, and so much more. I'm Tony Marino. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Have some cherry pie or a muffin. You have an excuse, and you only live once. And keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.